Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Fable: The Lost Chapters for PC and Xbox. This is basically a re-release of the original Fable, which was developed by Lionhead Studios and published by Microsoft back in 2004 as an Xbox exclusive. The Lost Chapters, however, was released on both PC and Xbox in 2005. And it included some additional content that wasn't in the original release. It's interesting, though, because this game was subject to a just gigantic hype campaign by none other than Peter Molyneux. This guy hit it big with Dungeon Keeper, and he later produced Black and White and then the movies. And when he got to Fable, he was just absolutely over-enthusiastic about it, just hyping it up as going to be this big revolution in role-playing game development and all that. And when it was released, it had this big hype campaign of, for every choice, a consequence. Implying that basically every single thing you do in this game will have some effect on the outcome of the whole thing. So, this had a lot of expectations going into it. So the question becomes, does it live up to those expectations, or does it, like a lot of people seem to think, really fall flat on its face despite all that? Well, the visuals are certainly fairly impressive for the time. It did look very good. It had a lot of color. The textures were pretty decent res. The animations were surprisingly fluid. The problem I have with it is that character modeling is just so all over the place. Now, I know they're going for this kind of cartoony, fairy tale-esque art style, but still, the characters just look misshapen. Especially in the hands. They have basically gigantic hands that just look ungainly and weird. It just bothers me. And the faces sometimes just look bothersome as well. It's just weird. But overall, the characters and everything look decent enough. You don't really get bothered by it for the most part. I mean, there are a few things here and there. Environments themselves are surprisingly decently detailed. There's a lot of stuff in there. It's just they're very linear. So they're able to get away with that more. Because you have these very kind of strict paths, so you're able to put a lot of detail into those. Whereas if you do, say, an open world game like, say, I don't know, Morrowind or Oblivion or something like that, you generally aren't able to pack in as much detail, and because you have to have this big open area. And of course that does factor in as well later on, by the way. But then there's the sound design, which is all over the place. The music is pretty decent. It's just fairly typical fantasy game music. Nothing really all that special. It doesn't sound bad, but nor does it sound particularly memorable. There's also the voice acting, which is god-awful. It is some of the worst voice acting I've ever heard, and I know they intended it to be that way. They wanted it to be ridiculous, and they succeeded at that. But at the same time, there are some voices where they literally hurt my ears to listen to. Mostly because they were so high-pitched, but still, the voice acting is just really awful in this game. And the worst part is, it's intended to be that way to kind of fit in with that goofy, fairy tale-esque art style, and it ends up just being an annoyance more than anything else. Sound effects, on the other hand, are just average. They do their job, that's it. They don't really need to do anything else, and they do a decent job at that. But what it really comes down to are the story and the gameplay. And this takes place in the land of Albion, where you play as a character who's just known as the hero. And it starts out with you being in the village of Oakvale as a kid, and you witness your village get destroyed by bandits, and this hero named Maze picks you up and takes you to the Heroes Guild, where you get trained to become a hero. Basically, you get trained in the ways of melee combat, archery, and magic. That's basically all a hero is. And you just eventually embark on a series of quests to basically discover your own past, is like what happened on to that village, and how does it affect the rest of the thing, as well as just become this great hero. And the ultimate feeling you get from the story, however, is I don't care. When I played through this storyline, there were several moments where it just went off on a tangent, and it had seemingly no relation to the storyline. But then later on you find out, oh, it had a very, very small relation to the storyline, yet you have to go off and on this long tangent that's completely pointless. okay, whatever. I mean, it's like the arena segment, for instance. It feels tacked on just to throw in a segment where it's just like, okay, bash the living crap out of things. Whatever. There's really not a heck of a lot of exposition to bring this thing around. I mean, your character doesn't even have a voice, for instance. So you really have no character whatsoever. You're just this blank slate the entire game. You can choose how you want to play it, and you can either be a complete dick or you can be a kind of a saintly figure. This just determines your alignment, whether you're dark alignment or light alignment. It really has no bearing on the game whatsoever other than that. And that's one of the things that really bothered me about this game. They really touted it as, for every choice, a consequence. If you embark on the light route, which is just be nice to people, save people, defeat only bad guys, that sort of thing, you get light alignment points, and eventually you'll see noticeable changes, as in you'll get a halo and your hair will turn white and you'll be this wonderful saintly figure, and everyone around you will be like, hero, yay! Whereas if you go the dark alignment, you grow horns, your hair turns black, and you're just like, I'm evil, and everybody around you cowers in fear. That's it! That's the only thing that changes depending on your alignment. At least during the course of the game. When you get to the ending of it, at least in the original Fable, if you're not including Lost Chapters, the original game's ending, you can choose between either a light ending or a dark ending. And if you choose the dark ending, you get this weapon of unimaginable power, and that's just the way it goes. And if you choose the light ending, then you just get rid of that weapon, and that's kind of it. Your alignment does affect the outcome, so there are a total of 4 endings, but that's really it. If you're light and you do the light ending, it's 1 ending, and so on and so forth. This carries over into the Lost Chapters, where you will find that if you got rid of that weapon of ultimate power, that's if you choose a dark ending, you just get the exact same weapon, only with a light alignment. So it's like, oh, it's pointless. There is no consequence for choosing what you do at the end. You get the exact same weapon over again. So there's no incentive to choose the light ending or the dark ending, just by nature of them being light or dark ending. You get the exact same reward no matter what you do, only with a slightly different twist on it. And then the story continuing into the Lost Chapters is pretty pointless as well. I mean, you're just sitting there like, okay, whatever, I don't care. I really don't. That's just boring. And that's how it felt the entire time I was playing this thing in terms of just the storyline. So eventually I just said, okay, screw it. I'm focusing on the gameplay. And it does some interesting things. You can pretty much seamlessly transition between melee, ranged, and magic combat, just based on the control scheme, and it works out pretty well. There are a few little issues with the PC controls, which are keyboard and mouse don't exactly provide that ultra fluid transition. So if you're going to play this thing, I would recommend getting either an Xbox controller or just playing it on the Xbox. I mean, the Lost Chapters is out on Xbox now, by the way. It has been for quite a while. But that's really how I'd recommend playing it with a gamepad, because with a keyboard and mouse, while it is playable and while it's certainly not a detriment, it's just not as smooth as it could be. But you can pretty much seamlessly transition, and they really touted this combat system as involved, and it's tactical almost, and you really need to pay attention to what you're doing. I pressed the attack button the entire time. I never defended in this entire game. I sometimes dodged out of the way of attacks, but that was it. I never actually defended during this entire game. Pretty much all you have to do is click the attack button, and you will defeat everything in your path, no matter how tough it is. And I actually never died in this game either. I mean, I got knocked down, but I got back up again all the time, because you get resurrection files all the time. And what these do is they basically just resurrect you on the spot, and it's no big deal. Thing is, you're going to use them so sparingly that by the end game, you're going to have a ton of these things. So no matter how many health potions you have, which you get a lot of them, by the way, you're never really going to run out of health or die. It's just not a problem. So combat in this game is actually ridiculously easy, despite being very smooth and fluid. And I actually do like how it's smooth and easily transitions and all that. It's just that it's just way too easy. The AI is completely retarded. They don't even really pose any threat at all. The only things I really had trouble with were the enemies that just knock you back, and that was only because that was annoying, and they didn't even really pose much of a threat either. I mean, when you got boss fights that require almost no effort at all, apart from slightly dodging whenever some certain attack happens, then you got a problem. Anyway, the rest of the game revolves around growing your experience and all that, and they try to tout it as a role-playing game. It really plays more like an action-adventure. But you do get a stat system in this game. You can choose between basically powers of strength, powers of skill, and powers of will. Your will is basically your magic, and you can choose different spells, or you can increase your magic power through that. Skill is your both your thievery and stealth, and your ranged attacks, which is archery. And the strength is obviously melee attacks and that sort of thing. And you upgrade these by using experience points, which you just get through doing all sorts of things throughout the game. You can do quests to get them up. You can do just run around and whack things in the face if you want to. Both of these things will give you experience points. And depending on how you play this game, you're going to get different experience points based on what you use. So if you use melee most of the game, you're going to get a lot of strength points, and you're going to put a lot of whenever you use those points. What ends up happening is, say you go into melee and you're just using melee the entire game, you get a lot of strength points, and you go to upgrade your skills. Well, you'll find that there are 3 experience bars in addition to just normal experience, which can be used on all of them. But if you have strength experience points, you can use those to upgrade your strength skills specifically. And it will use that up before it goes to the just normal experience pool. Same goes for skill and will. And while the system actually works out decently, it doesn't really have too much of an effect on you. I mean, it becomes more of a hindrance than it does a noteworthy feature, I should say. I mean, I never really needed it in a lot of cases, apart from maybe increasing my damage a little bit. That's all I wanted. And then I got one spell, which is an area effect spell that annihilates everything. So I'm just like, okay, whatever. Didn't really need anything else. But if they tweaked it out a little bit more in following games, then it would probably be a lot better, but I don't know how those are yet. So you have that system. You have a system where you get different equipment, of course, and that plays out pretty decently, although by the end game, all of your gear is going to be absurdly powerful. You're going to have tons of money and all that kind of stuff, so it's kind of rendered pointless. I mean, the only thing that's really going to change by getting new gear is that you'll find enemies are even easier to destroy, and they'll do even less damage to you and all that. Which they already don't do a heck of a lot of damage to you, so it's not really that big of a deal. But ultimately, the problem I had with this game, apart from the technical issues I was having, which was to say it crashes a lot on my PC, and I have no idea why. It was just boring. I felt like I was just clicking the entire time. It was like trying to do a bunch of QuickTime events, but without the QuickTime. It was just like a button kept popping up on the screen, and I kept just pressing it over and over and over again. And it felt tedious. Maybe with some tweaking it could be a lot better, but really Fable is just a mindless hack-and-slash action-adventure. It's not a role-playing game that's really deep or impressive. In fact, it's not really even a role-playing game at all. You don't really make any choices that have any weight on the world at all. So ultimately, I really didn't have a lot of fun with Fable, especially since it was crashing so much. But it wasn't a terrible game like I was expecting. I actually expected it to be an absolutely horrible game. But it ended up being, playable. Ultimately, I guess if you're into this sort of thing, you'll find it good, but I didn't really find it all impressive. I gave it a 2 out of 5. Thanks for watching.